Yo, this is Terrance Gaines, aka Brother Tech,
And this is Nica Montford, aka Tech Savvy Diva.
and welcome back to the Snob OS Show, the show for Apple snobs, where we talk all things Apple and then some. Definitely welcome you back to the show. This is episode 259 of the Snob OS Show, and we are back together. If just for this week, but we are back together. We definitely appreciate you hanging out with us. Going through it as I did the show by myself, and then Nica did the show by herself. We would definitely want to thank you for hanging in there. We definitely appreciate it for your continued support. If you want to support the show financially, as always, you can go to patreon.com/snob oscast. Show us some love financially for showing us some love. You get access to the live show early. You get access to some exclusive content. We just talked about all of our vacation plans, all of our recap of all the things we've done in the past 2 weeks, and some things to come this week, or next week rather. Next week I'll be out again on spring break with the family. So we kind of talked about that. So you won't hear that on this show, but you got to be a Patreon supporter to get all of that. Having said that, we're going to move right into this week's show. We always start with the lowdown, and it looks like Apple has announced WWDC 2024. Of course, the projected highlight of WWDC 24 is going to be most likely this new AI, whether it be Apple AI separate, or it looks like it'll be integrated with Siri, which makes the most sense. Of course, at WWDC, they always talk about the upcoming operating systems. For instance, iOS 18 will probably be revealed, and all the new features for that. macOS 15, watchOS 11, I think, and all
Mm-hmm.
the other ones.
Yep. All the other stuff.
Right. Maybe an M4 chip. I don't know. But of course, like I said, most of it is going to be centered on software. Again, like I mentioned, we are assuming that the bulk of WWDC this year will be focused on Apple's version of AI. So we'll definitely be interested to see how Apple integrates AI, if they do it, how Apple integrates AI as compared to OpenAI, Bard, or
Gemini.
Gemini,
Yep.
or what's Microsoft's version? Copilot, and Twitter, or Elon Musk's, what's his name of his
Gronk?
AI?
Is it
Gronk,
Gronk?
Gronk, Gronk,
Gronk?
Grok AI. So, as per usual, the technology space kind of does their own thing, and then Apple
Mm-hmm.
kind of waits around and they kind of see what's going on. And then once they put their hat in the ring, that's when that whatever technology really takes off. So sounds like it'll be the same for WWDC and Apple specifically. When they announce their AI, that's when everybody really jumps in and kind of,
Yep.
not gonna say solidifies, but that's when it's real, right?
Yeah.
We've been
Yeah.
talking about AI for the past year, maybe 2 years, but when Apple jumps in it, that's when it's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
And I talked a little bit last week that there was word that Apple was going to license Gemini AI.
okay.
So, and it was it was basically a two-pronged attack that they said that Apple was going to approach AI. So it was with a local LLM, a large language model company, and then with Gemini AI. So Gemini AI is mostly, I think, image based.
Hmm.
The LLM is language based. And
Hmm.
then if they come out with Apple AI, that's, I think, like you said, it's going to revolve around an enhanced Siri, because she is already a virtual assistant. So it's
Hmm.
probably going to be an advanced version of that. So it looks like, if the rumors and speculation are true, is that it's not going to be just one um, aspect of AI for Apple. They're going to do their own, and then they're going to collaborate and license with other organizations as well, so they don't have to completely build out a whole AI ecosystem, at least not at the onset.
And some people, I don't know if this is true or not, but just the way the WW and the WWDC is structured, I'm looking at this story in, what is this? Apple Insider. And
Mm,
I see in the comments, they're saying the way the WW and the WWDC is structured,
mm,
and with the announcement that Apple is no longer putting forth any effort into the Apple Car,
mhm.
people in the comments of this post are saying that Apple is going to buy Volkswagen, because if you look at the W and the W, it looks like a VW. Like I
Oh.
don't know. I was just reading that, but
To me, it's more like a waveform, like a
yeah,
signal processing thing to me.
maybe.
We'll
So
see.
we shall see. Like I said, WWC has been announced. It'll be June 10th, 2024. So of course we got to wait and see exactly, specifically, what Apple announces on that day.
And I have to say, I have never won the lottery system to go to WWDC. I would really much like to win the lottery system as a member of the Apple developer community to be able to go in person. So I'm putting that out there to the tech gods that if you
Hmm.
want to, allow my number to be called, hey, I'm ready to go and see and show up to the things.
All right. Well, putting it out into the universe, it won't hurt nothing.
Nope.
All right. So the next story I got coming up is iOS 17.4.1. iOS 17.4.1 has already been out, but
Mhm.
the hubbub about iOS 17.4 is they announced it, but they didn't tell us what was in it. So now they're just getting around to it. I really don't know why, but basically iOS 17.4.1, now that Apple has announced the details, fixes a flaw in core media and web RTC that could allow an attacker to execute code if you interact with an image. So basically iOS 17.4.1 patches up that flaw. But again, the whole hubbub about it was because they announced it last week but never really told anybody anything. Maybe they had something to do with, according to the story, Apple released these patches for its other devices
Mhm.
alongside the details for 17.4.1 and Safari 17.4.1 that addresses the WebRTC issue, while macOS yada yada yada. So basically, sounds
They
like.
waited until because the
Mhm,
iPad OS version just came out. So it
mhm,
sounds like they didn't want to maybe tip their hand
mhm,
to people who would exploit those vulnerabilities before
mhm.
they got it out, device wide. That's what it sounds like to me.
Yep, yep, yep. So, there you go. If you wanted to know what 17.4.1 was, Apple finally got this stuff together and finally let us know.
Yep.
All right. So the next story I got is a new Apple comparison tool, which sounds similar to what they've done before. Apple has always let you compare other iPhone devices. Like if you're trying to shop or whether I should get, the brand new version, or should I go a version or two back? You could always go on Apple's website and kind of do that comparison. But this comparison tool, the one they just announced, is almost like a Apple's sales team trying to get you to upgrade to the latest iPhone, not necessarily compare all the different iPhones, because according to this comparison tool, I actually went in and tried it around.
Mm,
With this comparison tool, it only lets you compare like one or two old models, and then you compare those against whatever the current model is. So right now, the current model is the iPhone 15. So
mm,
on one side, you can only compare like the iPhone 11 and maybe 12 and 13, or the
mhm,
iPhone 12, 13, 14 against the iPhone 15, right? So, but the trade-off for that is it kind of goes in and kind of shows you specifically with videos, with pictures, with a lengthy description on what makes the iPhone 15, which is the current one, so
mhm,
much better than the 11, 12, or whatever the case may be. It like says does a bunch of pictures, does a bunch of videos, goes kind of in depth on specific features that makes the current iPhone better, when the old, I'm gonna call it the previous comparison tool just went straight down spec for spec. You know,
Mm.
whatever the camera specs were, whatever the battery spec was, whatever the storage spec was, whatever the chip spec was, just line by line item spec sheet, right? Based on the comparisons. But the benefit to the old comparison tool is you could go through all of the current iPhones that are currently available. So right now, the oldest iPhone available is like the X, the 10, maybe even the 10R. And
Hmm.
then it goes up to 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, you know, and then maybe the SE and the SE2. You can
Mm.
compare all those versions and kind of line them up with any version. So if you wanted to do the iPhone 10R versus the iPhone 11, you could do that on the old version. On this new reasons to upgrade site, you can only compare, again, like I
To the
mentioned,
new one.
to the new one, right? But you get an in-depth look at the differences with, you know, more nicer features, nicer specs, nicer videos when this older one just does a spec sheet. So
They're like, why you looking at all this old stuff? Just look at the new stuff. Don't look at the old. Look at the new.
right, right. But I did want to put that out there if people are trying to decide whether or not they should get the 15 or wait until, I mean, of course, every year Apple does a new iPhone, or should you wait for the iPhone 16, right?
Yeah.
So that's all I had for that. I just want to let people know that comparison tool was out there. The next two stories that I've got, everybody and their mama looks like they're trying to sue Apple.
Yeah.
So this first one I wanted to highlight is a class action AirTags lawsuit. And basically what happened was, you remember when the AirTags came out, we even said it, it's like people are going to find wild ways to
To
use
use
these
it.
AirTags to track people. You're not supposed to track people, you're
Yeah.
supposed to track stuff, but people are going to figure out how to put GPSs on people's cars.
Yeah.
And that may run into some privacy issues because somebody may not want to be tracked, and they are being tracked because if you slip this in somebody's clothes or in their purse or in their whatever the case may be, you can
Mm.
kind of track that person. Apple then, after the AirTags were released and people were in fact doing that, Apple then kind of got together and finally said, okay, well, if an AirTag is on you, you know, your phone or your devices will let you know the AirTag is near you, whatever the case may be. But that wasn't good enough, appearing to this class action lawsuit, because this lawsuit, which was filed last year and given court approval to proceed earlier this month, said plaintiffs suffered substantial injuries from people who abused Apple's $29 Bluetooth tracker in ways the company didn't sufficiently work to address. So basically the lawsuit is saying, y'all knew people was going to go crazy with these AirTags, and y'all didn't think about all the ways people are going to abuse these things in enough time
Yeah.
to kind of put these fixes in. So that's what the class action lawsuit is about. So we'll see. Let me get your opinion. Do you think this lawsuit will go through and get farther, or will Apple find a way to get this thrown out?
I think, like you mentioned, we talked about this before when we first heard about the AirTag. And one of the things that I said was, you can tell there were not very many women in the room when they
Mhm.
made this piece of technology because, uh, you know, it would have been like, hey, I got my hand up, red flag, red flag. This has the potential to be an issue. And the changes that they made as far as the app that you can have that it goes with you, it detects, it lets you know
Mhm.
that, hey, there's an AirTag following you. It
Mhm.
would have likely been built in at launch
From the word go. Mhm.
from the word go, because that is going to be the biggest red flag, especially that a woman would in their mind be like, hey, this is an issue. I think the changes that they made with letting you know that there was a tracker with you, I think they did like a whole rollout of when they implemented this part of the technology, saying, go to the police station, doing all these things. At some point, there's only so much that technology can prevent,
Mhm.
because people doing nefarious things, they
Mhm.
will find a way
Mhm.
to do them. If you see just the last article that we talked about, the iOS fix, they were patching vulnerabilities. software isn't dormant. Software basically is a living, breathing thing that continues to evolve as people find other ways to use this. So, from that perspective, I think that Apple may have a case to say we did everything that we could do to help prevent this. But if people want to do some messed up stuff, it comes to a point where you can't necessarily put the onus 100% on us, because we've put in all the things that we can do with the software to
Mm-hmm.
help people. We've done it. There isn't anything else we can do. We can maybe look into it, try to expand it. But again, the more you add to the software, the more people adapt to it. And there are just some things that technology can't account for in human nature. And I say this as a person who, again, as Terrance mentioned, if you're a snobist, you would have gotten some, great insight and detail on some things that's been going on the last couple of weeks. But I also mentioned that I would have a story that directly related, um, in our pre-show to this show. And it was, while I was on vacation, we were on a boat, and everything was fine, and my phone dinged, and
Mm-hmm.
it basically said that an AirTag was following me,
Mm-hmm.
and it wasn't connected to me. Now I had AirTags with me because they were in my luggage.
Mm-hmm.
And then because I was on my phone, and it was like, we're at an event, you're not supposed to look at. And Alondra, Terrace's wife, she kind of swiped her hand in front of my phone, saying, get off your phone, get off your phone. And I was like, no, 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 something is not right. And I showed them my phone. And then I just started, looking in my purse, touching my person to see if anything was attached to me, because I got an alert that I had never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I don't even think it was the same type of alert that says that AirTag is detected with you that isn't
Mm-hmm.
yours. It was some weird notification that basically said something is with you that is not yours.
Mm-hmm.
And I was freaking out a little bit. And again, like I said, I was basically just, you know, checking my physical person, checking my clothes, checking my purse, seeing if anything was attached to me, because I didn't know what this was, and I didn't know where it came from. And I went in to find on my own items to make sure that the AirTags, I had 3 AirTags with me because I had 3 pieces of luggage. And so I had an AirTag in each luggage, and all of the AirTags that I had with me were at the hotel.
Hotel. Right.
Right. And so it was a little bit freaky. It was a little bit weird. So I just kind of sat down for a moment, and kind of sat there. But at the same time, the technology warned me to let me know that something was amiss.
Mm-hmm.
But the technology can't stop someone from putting an AirTag where it doesn't
Well,
belong and use it for what it's not intended to use it for, because the AirTag won't know that it's not on a a piece of luggage or on a bike or whatever the case may be. So it's, again, there's human intervention in all this technology, and it's only so much that the technology can take account of as it relates to human interaction, human sensibilities.
so inquiring minds want to know, do you ever figure out what the error message was?
No.
Oh, okay.
So I should have, panic mode set in. I should have screenshotted it just so I could so I could remember what the message was. But
Mm-hmm.
I was like trying to go into my Find My to see if it was showing up in my items. I wasn't expecting it to, because it wasn't associated with my phone, but it was saying that it was with me, and it wasn't something that, I'm trying to remember. It was basically saying it wasn't something that was normal to me. And I don't know if it was because we were in the UAE and they have different messages, maybe. I wouldn't suspect so, but you never know, because it is a country that has different laws and different ways of thinking. So I was like, I don't know if that was the case or not, but it was really kind of off-putting and honestly a bit frightening, because, I'm in a foreign country, far, far, far away, 7,000, over 7,000 miles away from home. And I couldn't account for this. And the thing is, I was in a group of other people who
Right.
all had iPhones as well, and nothing was pinging on their phones.
Right. Well, so I've had that message. Well, not that. I don't know if this is the same message, but I had a message pop up that says an AirTag is traveling with you that's not yours. And, I did the little, all right, well, all my, same thing, all my
Mm,
AirTags is in my luggage at the hotel. It
mm.
was my wife. She had one in her purse. So I was like, oh, all right, it's working as expected. My wife is following me because she's with me. Right. So I
Right.
don't know if maybe some other people in your group maybe
May-
had one in their purse or in their bag or in their person, maybe somebody, that's been, because the way it works is if an AirTag that's not connected to you is recognized by your phone or your iPad or your computer or whatever
mm,
the case may be for a long amount of time, and it seems to be moving where you're moving, then
mm.
that's when Apple's like, hey, you might want to pay attention. A AirTag, I don't remember the exact terminology,
Yeah.
but it says an AirTag is traveling with you or whatever, and that's, you're
Mm,
supposed to do exactly what you did, kind
yeah.
of figure out, if there's one on you, if there's somebody that's been, then you're supposed to say, all right, well, next level is there somebody legitimately following me,
Yeah.
that's either trying to put one on me or already has one on me, right?
Yeah.
So, but all the way around the world, getting back to the story, all of those features and rollouts, like you mentioned, probably would have been better for Apple's case if those would have rolled out when
With
the AirTags rolled out
Yep.
versus Apple rolling out the AirTags and we be guinea pigs
Yeah.
and we do our worst, which is what we did, put them
Which
on
is what
people,
people do.
put them in
The
cars,
cars, yeah.
you was using them to track people, men and
Yeah.
women using to track people, and Apple was like, oh, we didn't see that coming for whatever strange reason. So let's roll out these additional measures when again in this class action lawsuit was like, ah, y'all waited too long. So
Too
we
long.
so we'll see if Apple has to settle or if this is a case to where somebody's just trying to sue Apple just to get over, right?
To get a little money, yeah.
Which takes me to my next story. The United States decides they want to sue Apple, specifically the Department of Justice is suing Apple for antitrust violations, concluding a multi-year investigation into Apple's business practices. The U.S. government is also pursuing an antitrust cases against Google, Amazon, and Meta as part of an expansive look into the practices of major tech companies. So again, this what I read was as part of an expansive look into the practices. That don't necessarily mean that they have sufficient enough reason
Evidence,
to
yeah.
believe that Apple is a monopoly and they need to be broken up or parts splintered out or whatever the case may be. Case in point, some of the claims that Merrick Garland, who is the Department of
AG.
Justice, yeah, right. Some of the things that he was mentioning as far as their reasons as to why they were pursuing this case were just factually incorrect,
Yeah.
and it just for the Department of Justice to go to this length, you would assume that they have some serious, hardcore, substantial evidence. And basically, what the Department of Justice, what they laid out in their announcement was like, well, that's not right because you can use this and that and the third. Or like they mentioned, the fact that Apple monopolizes iMessage. And the whole point of iMessage is, well, you can still text somebody on an iPhone. It just won't be an iMessage,
Yeah.
So all those things, you know, that they laid out, it didn't seem like it held enough water for
Mhm.
the Department of Justice to actually say Apple, Google and an extension, Google and some of these other companies are actual monopolies that need to be broken up, right?
Yeah.
It seems like they just want to kind of pressure these companies to kind of think about the interoperability, which is fine. It'd be totally fair for the Department of Justice to say, hey, Apple, hey, Amazon, hey, Google, we know y'all like y'all ecosystems. We know y'all like to loop things in as a benefit or as a benefit to me picking one company over another, right? Maybe y'all should look at that and figure out going forward how y'all can make things more interoperable. That would be like,
Let's play well together.
right. I could get that argument for y'all to, for the Department of Justice to say, Apple's a monopoly, even though there are some cases, for instance, the case with the Apple Store, the case with, SMS, Apple's already kind of jumped ahead of that and is trying to, looking to incorporate RCS, which is rich communication services that'll give people who are non-iPhone users a whole bunch of additional benefits. They're already kind of jumping in front of that. Apple's already fighting the EU as far as the App
Mm,
Store, and the EU is making them kind of change some things up. So I don't know if this is the Department of Justice piggybacking off what the EU is doing. I don't know if this is like some politicians trying to score a win or trying to look tough against big tech, which is
mm,
what they've been doing in the past. They brought Facebook in, they've brought Instagram in, they've brought some of Uber and some of these other companies in. So now I guess it's Apple's
it's
time to
Apple's
sit in the
turn.
hot seat, right?
Yeah.
But nothing really will come of it. It just seems like this is a big step when the Department of Justice really kind of just wants Apple to play nicer.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a couple of weeks ago, the whole TikTok ban came
Right.
in, and it
Right.
was like you either leave America or you sell it to people who live in America. And it's like, this is a private company. You can't tell these people to give up their company and their proprietary tech to a US based company when they're not even based in the US. They're basically trying to say, we want to own it. You did all the work, but we want to own it because it's a huge platform. It has huge influence. So, of course, the US government wants to be able to be involved in having huge influence over billions of people. And the people who are putting in bids are people who are very chummy with, leaderships in the US government. So, it kind of reeks of that to me. And also looking at some of the bullet points of the things that they're calling out, super apps, cloud streaming, messaging
Mhm.
apps, smartwatches, digital wallets. Basically, they're saying, to me, it reads as, Apple, your technology is too good. And it's not fair to some of the other companies whose technology, who does the same thing, isn't as good. So you should make it where people who aren't on your ecosystem, who don't use your technology, can be able to have access to this ecosystem, this good technology that you have over here. That's what
Mhm.
it seems like to me. And I also heard people talking about one of the issues that Apple is in the hot seat is because, remember, we talked about it before, Apple rolled back some of the easy accessibility to the government, to the law enforcement agencies, to be able to get into iPhones with just saying, hey, we think we want to look at somebody's phone because they could possibly be doing
Mhm.
something bad. And Apple would
Mhm.
just hand it over. And
Right.
they rolled back some of those protections. And I get it. After I read it, I was like, what, that makes sense. It's just now they're coming at it at so many different angles that don't really make any sense, because there are so many other smartphones, there's so many other operating systems out there. There's no way to say that Apple has a monopoly when you have all these other phone companies, not just in the States, but worldwide. I can kind of see the App Store situation, which I
Mhm.
think is similar to what you're saying. They're kind of piggybacking off the EU, but all this other stuff, it makes it
Right.
makes zero sense.
And then Apple kind of goes, like you mentioned in the story that the link that you're mentioning, Apple kind of respond, not kind of, Apple does respond to and refute some of these claims from the Department of Justice. For example, the DOJ lawsuit accuses Apple of violating Section 2 of the Sherman Antitrust Act in 5 ways. In a statement shared with Apple Insider, Apple has refuted each of the claims, stating they are either based on outdated information or misrepresentations of the company's business model. There's another part on contracts and emissions. The DOJ claims Apple imposes contractual restrictions and fees that limit features and functionality that developers can offer iPhone users. Plus, Apple selectively restricts which API developers have access to, degrading non Apple app functionality. Apple responds to that saying that the claim is misleading. Um, any rules or limitations that are in place exist to protect user privacy, security, experience, yada, yada, yada. There's a DOJ issue with Apple's 30% commission that doesn't mention that 85% of developers don't pay any commission, and a
Hmm.
vast majority of eligible for a reduced 15% commission. Apple's commission has been tested in court before, of course, by Epic Games, and Apple won on that front. So DOJ is like, Apple's charging too much commission. That 30% thing, that number, that 30% number always seems to float around
Yeah.
as Apple's taking a lot. 30% is a lot,
Yeah.
right? But what people don't mention is 85% of developers don't even pay 30%. And those who do are only paying 15%. So what are
Yeah.
you talking about, right?
Right.
Um, I don't know what the super apps thing, whatever that is, but on cloud streaming services, Apple says game services have always been allowed on the App Store. The company has even made changes to its guidelines to further promote game streaming. I think this maybe has something to do with the Epic thing. Specifically, like we mentioned, cross-platform messaging app. The DOJ is concerned that SMS being only available in Apple's Messages app and not available in third-party apps is an anti-competitive move on Apple's part. However, Apple has no data that shows users desire SMS elsewhere, and it's not a feature used by popular platforms on Android. For example, WhatsApp doesn't even offer SMS, and Signal is dropping SMS support on Android. So for the DOJ to say that they're concerned that SMS is only being used in Apple's messaging app and not available on third-party apps is kind of false, because the other apps ain't using them either.
Nobody's right.
And like I mentioned at the top, Apple is looking to incorporate RCS, which will play nicely with Google, with some of these other messaging services, to incorporate and give people nicer features that we iMessage users have been using for a
Already
long
have.
time. Right,
Yeah.
right, right. So on and so forth. So Apple um, kind of refutes, goes through, and kind of
Line by
highlight,
line. Yeah.
yeah, line items, all of these claims, which again don't seem like, again, I could be biased because I'm an Apple user, but at the same time, just based on looking at these things, prospectively, it don't seem like DOJ really wants to sue Apple. They
It's
really don't want to
about this.
break them up. They
Yeah.
kind of just want to be like, hey, play nicer. And this is kind of like their lean on Apple to do that. So whether or not Apple takes the bait or they push back and this becomes a real issue is, we'll find out. But I don't get the impression that this
I
is
think it's a
going
lot of
to,
grandstanding.
yeah, yeah, definitely don't get the impression it's going to go very
Yeah.
far. But I guess, the government is trying, I suppose, but if you, as a side note, you know, the government really isn't passing a lot of laws and a lot of bills,
Yeah.
comparatively speaking. It's like they're doing a lot of nothing. So maybe this is the government's way of saying, all right, look, we're doing something. Hey, we're taking down big tech. And it's like, well, we got some other stuff that we would
If
prefer
you want
that
to
you
take
focus
down
on.
big tech, if
Right.
you want to take down a monopoly, how about you start with Ticketmaster? Because
Right.
by the time you buy a ticket on Ticketmaster to check out, the fees are the
Right.
same price, if not more, than the actual ticket. So if you want to go after somebody, go
Hmm.
after Ticketmaster, who bought their biggest rival, Live Nation.
Right.
That's a monopoly.
Exactly.
Break that up.
And we all hate it, right? So
Right.
instead of attacking Apple, which a large percentage of Americans are like, yeah, we're cool with Apple. It's like, why don't you attack something that most Americans is like, we hate that.
We can get behind the Ticketmaster situation. Go
Right,
after that.
right. There's a lot of stuff y'all need to be focused on, but I
Absolutely.
digress.
Yeah.
All right, so that is going to do it for the lowdown. We're going to move into second string, and I put this story in here um, as it relates to electric vehicles, specifically plug-in hybrids. It kind of made, not necessarily kind of, it didn't make sense to me that we went from kind of messing around with electric vehicles as a country
Mhm.
and then going full bore on fully electric, fully autonomous vehicles when we kind of had this middle ground with the plug-in hybrids.
Mhm.
American car companies, global car manufacturers like plug-in hybrids are stupid. Nah, we going full electric. I don't know if that was because everybody wanted electric vehicles. It may have something to do with the government mandating that a lot of these car manufacturers go full electric by 2030, 2050,
30?
whatever 2030, whatever that number
It's been
was.
30. Yeah.
So the car manufacturers like, all right, well, we government said we got to go full electric. So forget plug-in hybrid. Let's go ahead and do that. But now things have kind of died down
Mhm.
to where the government has kind of eased restrictions as it relates to emission mandates. They kind of back down some off of those strict mandates, and they've actually the government has added in a loophole to speak of enabling car manufacturers to use plug-in hybrids as this loophole to get around that mandate and those emissions. So I guess my question to you is, do you see car manufacturers now saying, all right, now is the time to introduce and offer more options versus just going gas and then fully electric? Will we now finally see kind of like if you got plug-in hybrid where there be fully braking hybrids or a plug-in, where you actually have to plug it in? Is that something that, is feasible for us now that the government's kind of eased some of those mandates?
I think so, primarily because people saw how hard it was to go fully electric.
Right, right.
And the government saw how hard it was to go fully electric and
Building
realizing that
infrastructure and all that.
their
Yep.
expectations were completely unreasonable.
Right.
You're trying to take centuries worth of technology,
And dogma.
meaning combustible engines
Right.
who use gas, and you're
Mhm,
trying to basically have a complete shift in society over the course of 10, 15 years, because this maybe started around what, 2020, maybe 2015, and they wanted all this done in you know 2030. We're
mhm.
already in 2024. So
Right.
that's 6 years from now, and they're
That ain't enough
expecting a
time.
complete societal technology shift in a smart amount of time when it took us hundreds of years to get to combustible engines and get it, you know, streamlined, get it mainstream, get it our primary form of providing transportation.
Mhm,
And you're now trying to do this. What they found out is that going fully electric is not necessarily safer for the environment, which was one of the original selling points of, we don't have to have the emissions. It's not bad, but it's always a yin and a yang. We may not have to deal with emissions with electric vehicles, but we do have to deal with battery creation, battery waste.
the ca
Once the batteries aren't good
Mhm,
anymore, how do you recycle them? And again, I think a lot of people are more comfortable with hybrids because they still have, that safety net of saying, I don't want to use the electric part. I'm just going to use the gas part.
mhm,
And then when I feel more comfortable, or when the technology is more further along, more developed, more ingrained in society, then I'll start using the plug-in features and just, basic usability. I live in a small town. I'm going to have a charging station, or I'll
mhm,
maybe only have one charging station, charging location that has maybe five, ports. What if, all the people in, even if you have one, say there's 20 people in town who have an electric vehicle, somebody's not going to get some juice because they're going to be constantly used.
mhm,
So it's one of those things where I think people are finally realizing that this hurry up and go mentality
mhm,
isn't going to work. I see it all the time in software engineering. These people who sit up in the ivory towers, who don't know the fundamentals of what it
mhm.
takes
The
to create this.
intricacies.
Yeah, they have all these grand ideas. We're going to do this, we're going to do that, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. It's going to be fabulous, it's going to be great. But then the people who have to build, it's like, this isn't feasible. No, we have a 6-month timeline to get this done. We know it can be done. Just put more people on it. Just put more
Hmm.
time into it. And it's like, no, this is not how new technology works. You have to be giving the room to fail and to go back and to the drawing board and say, okay, we tried this, it didn't work. So let's take what we learned and go back and make it better. And it's
Yeah.
all iterative. It's a constantly revolving door of change. And what I don't think people realize, particularly the government, is that, well, we want it this way. And
Hmm.
that's all. You make it happen. And then when they realize, oh, maybe we overestimated this, we didn't really give it enough thought.
Right.
Now it's rolling back. Instead of saying, okay, we have gas combustible engines. Now let's maybe do a hybrid. Let's maybe go in the middle. And we have the fully electric down the line,
Right.
2050, not in 15 years. Let's go down to 2050 where we're going to have this plan in place to give people, to give infrastructure, to give time to catch up with the technology that you're trying to do. So, in short order, yes, I think we'll see more plugins, and I think we'll see more people willing to go with plug-in
The baby
hybrids.
steps. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right.
Incremental steps,
Hmm.
incremental people.
Right. Well, I mean, not for nothing. It is it. I agree with the government saying, "Hey, we've got to do something to reduce emissions. We have to do something to protect the planet. We got to do something, right?"
Yeah.
And electric vehicles at the time, me personally, I was like, all right, we've been doing internal combustion engines for like hundreds, almost like over a century now.
Yeah.
It's like we ain't figured out no better way to do this,
Yeah.
and then, a couple car companies, specifically Tesla comes along. The cars are super popular. It seems like we are yearning, itching for something new. So then the government does this big old mandate, and kind of not necessarily forces, but it's almost like, look, car companies, y'all need to do something different. But again, there should have been a middle ground. There should have been baby steps, to where we can kind of slowly walk into adopting fully electric, especially when we now find out now that companies are full steam ahead with electric vehicles. The infrastructure ain't there. I've seen a swell of YouTube videos of all these people buying electric vehicles, whether it be for clout, whether it be for views, but the same theme was you go to a charging station outside of your house. It's cool. It's cool to charge your electric vehicle at your home
Mm,
because you can plug it in the garage or in the driveway or in the carport, let it sit overnight. You're not in
mm,
a hurry. You're not going anywhere. In the morning, it's fully charged. As long as you're doing like a daily commute, you're fine. The
mm.
second you need to take a long trip, the second that you need to charge away from your house, that's when everything turns into a shit show. So
When
all
you
these
step
videos,
outside of the ideal situation and people
right?
aren't planning for non-ideal situations, it's only the ideal situation box.
Right, right. And the government clear did not do enough to help, to aid. Yeah, you can throw money at companies,
Yeah.
but the same thing with the roads. For fully electric vehicles to mass take place, for us to massively adopt electric vehicles, the infrastructure has to be there. And it just ain't. And just
Nope.
telling car companies, you fix the infrastructure, that ain't the for a car company to put all of this new technology in the infrastructure that they then have to share with other car companies ain't in the
Yeah.
benefit of the car company. It needs to
No.
come from the government to work to redo the infrastructure. And of course,
Yeah.
Biden, the current president, is, he's been the main thing about infrastructure, but fixing roads, fixing bridges, fixing potholes, and introducing a whole new technology on the majority of the roads is a tall task.
You're asking for a lot.
And that needs to be there first before you then
Yeah.
push car manufacturers to adopt electric. Now, if the government took the 2000s up to 2020 to do all this infrastructure and
Mhm.
then say, all right, car companies, it's your turn, it probably to
We've done our
transition.
part.
Right, right. The transition would have been a little bit smoother, but that ain't the case. So now everybody has to kind of dial it back, which again
Yeah.
plug-in hybrids should have been, there should be way more plug-in hybrids
Yeah.
out there on the road now. There's more fully electric vehicles, I think. This is no research. This is just me shooting off at the mouth. But my guess is there are more electric vehicles, fully electric vehicles out there than there are plug-in hybrids, which is kind of
Yeah.
crazy when the plug-in hybrid is like the in between fully combustible and fully electric, which most of us should have at least one plug-in hybrid, but we don't. But it seems like they're trying to right the ship. So it seems like this is the right path. So we'll see how many car companies start to kind of dial back their fully electric plans and kind of ramp up their plug-in hybrids. All right,
Yep.
so that's going to do it for second string. We're going to move into for the culture, where we talk anything culture, anything social, culture relevant. I've got two things on the dock. I'll let you choose. Uh, just recently, the Freaknik doc came out. Since you
Mm-hmm.
are a Georgia native and my wife is a Georgia native, and that brings back a lot of nostalgia. We can talk about that, or we can talk about these Diddy raids that Puff Daddy has been um, in the news as of late for one thing or another. And it seems like sex trafficking is up on the plate for Diddy.
Jesus
So
Christ.
which one do you rather choose? Freaknik doc or Diddy raids?
So I didn't have time to watch the Freaknik doc, but I would rather talk about that than the Diddy raids
Okay.
because Diddy raids, it's a lot and it's changing. Like it seems like almost every hour.
Right,
Uh
right.
and it's the worst. But I have heard a lot about the Freaknik doc, so I think I could probably add to the conversation.
Okay. So I watched it, and they did a good job of encompassing all that was Freaknik. It's not a
Hmm.
long series. I think maybe an hour and a half, maybe almost, maybe even 2 hours,
So it is a
maybe.
movie or is it a series?
It's a documentary.
Oh, okay. So okay.
In and out one thing. It's not,
Okay.
8 or 9 episodes or anything like that. And they kind of go from, which a lot of people didn't know, how Freaknik started,
Hmm.
and to the point to where it kind of turned to where they was like, all right, this is just too much, right?
Yeah.
So, they had Jermaine Dupri, they had, Luke, they had, a lot of the influential people who kind of took Freaknik from it just being a college, a picnic for local Atlanta
The AUC.
HBCUs. The
Yeah.
AUC comprises Spelman, Morehouse, Morris Brown, and Clark Atlanta.
Hmm.
All of those colleges are like within almost a 5-10 mile radius of each other. And the way Freaknik started was at the time in the late 80s, I want to say 87, 88.
It's no,
Um,
I'm looking at it said 1983 when it
83.
first
Okay.
started.
So even,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So back in 83, um, there were a bunch of local clubs. And what I mean by local clubs is, when you go to a college, people from all over the country
Yeah.
and people from certain states or areas tend to stick together when they find themselves at a college or university in another state. So they have, of course, they have, if you're in Atlanta, if you're coming from California, they got a California club. So all the kids from California kind of click up. Same thing for Virginia, New York, well, DC Metro, Washington,
Yeah.
DC Metro, which I thought was funny. They specifically said DC Metro Club. So they kind of kicked Baltimore out, because when you think of the DMV in Washington D.C., you think of D.C. as in what the district. You think
Of
of
Columbia.
Virginia,
Mhm.
District of Columbia. You think of Virginia, just on the other side of the water, right when you
Mhm.
cross into from Virginia, right when you cross into D.C.
Mhm.
And you think of like the surrounding areas, the suburbs of DC,
Mhm.
before you pass into Baltimore, which is all Maryland, right?
Yeah.
But I thought that's cute that they said DC Metro. So Baltimore folks, y'all get out of here. Y'all do your own little club. So
Not
basically,
claiming it.
right. So DC Metro, they were a group on the AUC campus, and they literally either didn't want to or couldn't afford to go back home for spring break.
Mhm.
So they were like, all right, so since we can't really go home, what are we going to do to kind of entertain ourselves on campus during spring break. So they decided to do a picnic.
Picnic.
Right. And the reason why they called it Freaknik, because in the early 80s, everybody was freaking everything, but it really wasn't, it's not freak in the sense of
Not
derogatory.
sexually.
Right, right, right. They used freak for like, they had like a year's worth of events that this DC Metro Club did, and they all kind of used freak because you think of disco, you know, you think of that song Freak Out, you know, they was kind of, that was
Because
the N
again, this
word,
is the early 80s
the
now.
early 80s,
We're
right?
just out of disco. We're just
Right.
out of the 70s.
Right, exactly. So they said, all right, well, what we're going to name this thing, we're going to put freak and picnic together, and they called it Freaknik. So that's where it started. And basically, it was just a picnic. They had it at Piedmont. First, they had it on campus, and then as it grew, they moved to Piedmont Park, and they would just have a picnic, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And then, of course, it grew and grew and grew and grew and grew. It grew into the 90s, and they talk about where it kind of took off. And
Mm-hmm.
it kind of took off around, I'd say 92.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's really, really got super popular to where it grew from just college kids on the AUC campus with comprised of just those four HBCUs. And then
Mm-hmm.
it grew to Georgia State, and it grew to Georgia Tech. And then it grew to all black HBCUs, to where all HBCUs in you know, Nashville and North Carolina, South Carolina,
Yeah.
all the HB, that was like,
Tennessee,
right, right,
Florida,
right.
all of them.
That's where I that's where I
Texas.
that's where I was introduced to Freaknik, because I went to college in Tennessee State in Nashville, Tennessee. We had friends that went up to Nashville from Atlanta, and the one thing they said, we as Northerners, the one thing we have to do is you
You
have to
have to
go to
experience.
Atlanta for Freaknik, right?
Yeah.
So, like I said, grew from 200,000 to 300,000 to just college kids to just people.
Just people.
Right.
And that's where it turned.
Right. Because, you know, they mention Luke, because, you
Mm.
know, that's where good and bad, that's where it kind of grows into it just being a picnic, to it just being a bunch of parties, to
Yeah.
like to where it got kind of dangerous
Especially
for
for women.
specifically for women, because, you know, it turned into a big party, a big citywide party. So
With a
that's
bunch of
where,
pervs.
with a bunch of pervs, right? With video cameras, right? Because the Luke thing, the Luke, and for those who don't know, Luke Skywalker, the group Two Live Crew, you know, they had their fights with the government as far as, you know, explicit lyrics.
Censorship. Yeah.
Right. That's where whole the explicit lyrics in the corner of your CDs that came from Two Live Crew and
The
them fighting with the government.
parental
Right.
advisory.
That all came from them. So you can imagine,
Thank them.
what kind of vibe, as the young kids would say, what kind of vibe they brought from Florida up to Atlanta for Freaknik, right? So but in addition to that, they kind of talk about all of the where it originated from. They talk about all the people who kind of got their start.
Hmm.
One of the interesting things that I learned from the documentary was when Freaknik was happening, there was no hip hop station in Atlanta. You know, the local radio stations refused to play hip hop. They would play R&B, they would play funk, they would play all those
Because
things.
this is still the South, like the
Right,
deep red South.
right.
People forget that.
Even though Atlanta is a black city, the money was spent by, you know, whoever controlled the money, whoever kind of controlled the city, which
Yeah.
I'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. Um, but like I said, what I thought was interesting was they refused to play hip hop, right? So a lot of the artists, the way hip hop kind of took root in the South in Atlanta was because of Freaknik,
Hmm.
because you have all these people in one place,
Hundreds of thousands of people.
and these artists, these hip hop artists, are trying to break into the industry. And the way you back in the day, the way you used to break into the industry is through the radio stations. The radio
Hmm.
stations will play your song, people will call in, I want to hear that, I want to
Request
hear that, I
it.
want to hear that. And then that's how you break onto the radio, right? Well, since radio stations really weren't playing hip hop like that, artists like Luke, artists, you know, a lot of New York groups,
Mhm.
would pass out their music to all these people who would then immediately kind of put their tapes, cassette tapes back in the day, put their
Mhm.
tapes in the car and kind of play this music. So that's how you got discovered. So that's how um, um, Outkast, Goody Mob, because
The
Atlanta
whole
music,
Dungeon family.
right? Atlanta music was local, but it
Mhm.
really wasn't spread out. It really wasn't, accepted by Atlanta radio stations, even though you had some of that music there. Now all these people are listening to this music, and that's how kind of hip hop took root in Atlanta and in the South as expanded was
Mhm.
because of Freaknik. One of the sad things, in addition to how raunchy it got towards the end, one of the things, everything is not supposed to last forever.
Mhm.
So I'm not saying we should have kept Freaknik up until the 2000s, up until now, right?
Mhm.
But I find it interesting that the city, the people in the city of Atlanta specifically,
Mhm.
kind of let Freaknik do their own thing, left them alone, really didn't bother them, let them logistically figure out how they're going to do this thing, right? When it was small. And even as it got bigger into the 90s, the city really wasn't involved. They kind of
Mm-mm.
helped a little bit, but it really wasn't a coordinated effort between the organizers of Freaknik and the city, right? And you can tell that became a issue when the Olympics was announced in Atlanta, right? When the Olympics was announced in Atlanta, the city was like, "Hey, what y'all black people doing down here? What's going on? What are y'all
Yeah.
doing? Why are y'all? What's going on? We can't have none of that
We gotta clean it
because
up.
the Olympics coming. We got company coming. Company's coming over.
Company is coming.
We got to clean up the house."
Yeah.
Then the city started to restrict where you could go. Kind of heavy
No
hand,
cruising zones,
all that.
all of that. Yeah.
Which I get it. Money talks. The Olympics was going to bring billions of people, millions of
Billions of
people, and billions of
billions of
dollars
dollars. Yeah.
into Atlanta. So you kind of want to you want to put your presentation
Best foot
matters, right?
forward. Yeah.
Right. My thing is, why did the city was okay with Freaknik being this thing that was getting a little bit out of hand, but y'all waited until you couldn't rein it in.
Yeah.
What I learned was, I don't understand how come from the go the city wasn't more involved with helping organize and helping to maintain Freaknik. In my opinion, if the city would have got involved early on and helped on a larger scale, similar to Daytona, similar because they mentioned it's like,
Panama
I
City.
right, I don't the people, the organizers, the people who are being interviewed was like, I don't understand why everybody's looking at Freaknik as this raunchy, crazy
One
event.
of a kind. Nobody's ever done this before.
When you got Daytona, they mentioned Daytona Beach, they mentioned Galveston,
Galveston
Texas,
Beach.
they
Yep.
mentioned Panama City, they mentioned all these events where these white people, these white
Spring
college kids
Bling.
go and
MTV.
and
Yeah.
they get drunk and they pass out and they get inappropriate. They do all the things we were doing that we were doing in Freaknik, but we're doing it now. It's a problem. I think the
Yeah.
difference is with Daytona, with Texas, the city is involved.
Yeah.
With Atlanta, they was like, all right, y'all do y'all be all right, y'all do y'all thing. And then they try to rein it in all at once, which that
Yeah.
wasn't gonna help because they, instead of them saying, all right, let's work with y'all, let's figure out how we can organize this better, let's figure out how we can taper down some of the lewdness of the event while still letting y'all have fun, while still letting y'all do y'all thing. They were kind of like, Olympics coming, clamp. And they clamped down so hard that they had nowhere to go
Yeah.
but to kind of close it down because again, the city businesses were complaining that nobody could get into the city. The businesses were complaining that nobody could spend money because the city clamped down so hard on Freaknik that nobody could literally get into the city because they was trying to control everything. I was like, well, you kind of did it to yourselves because you didn't get in early enough to kind of manage this thing. So
And you know why I think that is? I think because Atlanta is a very nepotism type city.
Mhm.
City leadership can be very corrupt. We've seen
Mhm.
it with Bill Campbell. We saw it with Kasim Reed. We saw it a little bit with Shirley Franklin. I think when this first started and when it started to get big, city officials didn't see a way that they could make money from this. They didn't, I think they didn't see a
Oh.
way that they could get a piece of the pie
Mhm,
on this.
mhm,
And so it was
mhm,
like, you know what? We can't make no money from this. We can't get nothing
mhm,
from this. We just gonna let the
mhm.
natives have at it. And I
Right.
think that's why. And then when the announcement, the bid for the Olympics came in, and then Atlanta won the Olympics, it's like, whoa, we can make a lot of money on
Mhm,
these Olympics. So we got to get these DEIs out
mhm.
of here because this is where the real money is. We need to get in these pockets. So I
Mhm,
really think that's, the reason why the city didn't really get involved in the beginning. Also, people have to really remember this started in 82.
mhm,
A Different World had a lot to do
mhm,
with this whole environment because
mhm,
A Different World was the first time that people saw Black kids in college
mhm.
living this experience. They didn't realize this is what HBCUs are.
The
And if
sole
you
the sole reason why I went to college and the sole reason why I went to an HBCU was because of Different World. I'm like, "Oh, is that what it's like?" Not
That's what
only
they
am I
doing down there in the South.
not
Because
only
if you think about it,
Yep.
all the HBCUs,
Mhm,
mostly, not all, there's some who are in the North, but most HBCUs are in the South.
mhm.
Why? Racism.
Right.
And this is where the largest block of Black people were in the South. So it showed this rich, vibrant culture with the campus where it's all Black, it's all melanin, everybody understands each other. You got these Greeks, you got these parties, you got the gear, you got all this stuff. And it's just like, whoa, this is
Mhm,
it. And where it started to turn, as you said, I remember people talking about Freaknik when I was a kid, in middle school, in
mhm,
high school, because it was a really big thing. And from what I understand, like I said, I didn't watch the doc, but from what I understand, when Luke got into this
mhm.
in the 90s,
Yeah, I said
that's where
92, 93 is when he
that's
got
when it
involved.
took the turn,
Mhm,
and it went from college students and college age students to grown men
mhm,
coming in and preying on
mhm.
these college kids.
And they told a story. They brought somebody in, one lady specifically who she didn't get raped or anything like that, but she tells a story when her and her friend, went to a gas station. Her friend left her purse in the gas station. She went back. Some people got in the car. The person that was in the car who was getting interviewed was fighting with the people. They dragged her out and they were like in the process of stripping all her clothes off. And the only reason why, according to her, is they stopped is because somebody yelled police and then people kind of dispersed, right?
But it did actually happen at
Yes,
a MARTA
yes,
station. Yeah.
yes.
Oh,
Mhm.
you're getting that part. Okay.
No, I was gonna say
Okay.
that the person that they
That
interviewed.
scenario. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 but, they go on to talk about how, it got bad and it painted a bad picture. Again, it didn't represent all of Freaknik. It didn't represent all the people at Freaknik, but of course, those stories were the ones that if it bleeds, it leads. And
Yeah.
those are the stories that took center stage right around the time of the Olympics coming. And again, that goes back to my point. It's like the city knew that things were it was starting to
It
take
was
a
starting to get
mind
too
of
hot. Yeah.
right. And in the early 90s is, in my opinion, where the city should have said, all right, let's help y'all let's help y'all work this event to where you can
Mm,
continue to have it, but it continues to be safe and it
safe.
continues to be something that we can do and it doesn't overly affect local businesses.
Yeah.
Doesn't overly affect the local
It works for
residents.
everybody. Yeah.
Right, right. They waited until, like you said, they saw this big money opportunity and said, "Oh, we're
Mhm.
not about to mess that up." So they clamped down so hard on Freaknik without offering them any sort of support that the event couldn't last longer. So I think in
Yeah.
'98 was the last year that they had it, and it's like they kind of just said, "Well, if y'all can't do it, we clamping it down." And like it's kind of sad. Like I said, nothing lasts
But
forever.
honestly, it was honestly for what it turned into, it was the best for them to shut it down because it had gotten to the point where college students weren't even going. It
Right.
was just grown people.
Yep, yep. People in the city were like, Freaknik's coming. All right, we are going on vacation somewhere else because it
Yep.
just got so bad. And I think it was a
Yep.
combination of the city, again, the city waiting too long to
Yeah.
work with
To
the
intervene. Yeah.
organizers, and the meaning, the original aspect changed, like you
Yeah.
mentioned, from college age kids to just anybody to just join in on the debauchery.
Debauchery.
Right,
Yep.
right, which wasn't all of it, but that's a part of the history. So I do
Yeah.
appreciate the documentary for not glossing over it got kinda rowdy at
The
the
real
end.
stuff. Yeah.
Right, and like I mentioned, they brought in somebody who was directly affected by, all the stuff that was going on. They didn't kinda hide that.
Yeah.
They did talk about people trying to reprise it, but again, things are not supposed to last forever. So, you
The
just let
moment has
people know it's like,
passed.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Do
yeah,
something
yeah.
new.
Right, exactly. So,
Yeah.
that's the one to talk about it because I went, once I got to Tennessee in college, the first thing I did, my first trip to Atlanta, no, let me not say that. The second trip to Atlanta was going to Freaknik in 1997. I think I meant to dig through my pictures. I think I have a picture of me and my wife. My then she was a friend. So, all right, real quick, this is backstory time. So my wife is from Atlanta and she came up to Nashville for college. And I was from, at the time I graduated from high school in Wisconsin. And me and my friend went down to Nashville for college, right? Prior to the college year starting, there's a summer program that me and my friend were a part of. And then some people from Atlanta were a part of this pre-collegiate program. So
Mhm.
my wife's friends came to this college pre-collegiate program. She didn't come. So my me and my friend, we made friends with all these people the summer before our college year. So when we came back for school for the regular school year, we
You
had
knew
already had
people.
these. We knew people. We already had this group. So
Mhm.
then here comes my wife that was a part of this group, that I had already made friends of. So that's where we kind of meet. And
Mhm.
then, we go down to Atlanta for something. I can't remember what it was in the fall. But then Freaknik rolls back around. Oh, we got to go back down there for that. So
Mhm.
then I think in the springtime of 97, I think it was. This is towards the end, right? When it was kind of
Mhm.
crazy. And we were just kind of just being there. We wasn't probably a part of it. We were just in
Mhm.
the city. I think I
Mhm.
have a picture of me and my wife sitting on my lap, like in the city somewhere
Mhm.
because we were stuck because we couldn't go nowhere because we're all in this big group together and down
Mhm.
in Atlanta. So that's kind of like how we met almost. And I
Mhm.
have to Freaknik to thank for that. So yeah, like I said, it was a time, you had to, if you just went just one time, just to say you're a part of that history. I thought that was pretty cool. And the doc did a good job of talking about the beginnings and how it kind of grew to where things kind of fall apart to where it was kind of like, all right, it's just time to call this
It's
quits
done.
because it's just time to call this
Yeah.
quits.
For sure.
Right. All right. So that is it for the culture. We're going to move into the hookup, something that saved my butt when I was traveling last week. It's something I definitely think everybody should do, no matter where you're going, whether you have data connectivity or not. Luckily, the carrier that I have, when we went to some of the countries that we visited last week, we had data connectivity, but it was kind of shoddy. It wasn't 5G or anything like that. But one thing that I did that saved my butt, and that's my hookup for the week, is in Apple Maps, there is a feature now to where if you type in a city and if the area permits it, gives you the ability to download an offline map. And that definitely came in handy because there were some areas to where we were traveling. Cell phone service was kind of spotty based on our carrier, but I was able to go into Apple Maps. And since I had downloaded the map of that area ahead of time, I was able to get all the information just as fast as I had, as you would normally have when you have cellular connectivity. So that is my tip for the week in
I
Apple
will
Map.
add to that. I
Go
will
ahead.
add to that. There are offline languages.
Okay.
Download those as well.
Okay. All
If you
right.
need something in the translate, if you
Yeah, in the
need
translate
to,
app. Okay.
yeah, if you, because in some countries, it's like, look, we're not speaking English. We're not trying to, you
Mm-hmm.
over here need to learn ours.
Mm-hmm.
Find, download languages of where you're going to be as well.
Yep. So that is our tip for the week. If you are traveling, especially internationally, definitely take the time before you leave to download offline maps of the cities that you're going to be visiting and download the languages that they speak so you can have access to those languages in the Translate app if you do need to talk to somebody who doesn't share the same language. So that is our tip for the week. And Nica, if you don't have anything else, I think that's
Nope.
going to do it for this week's show. Tell the folks where they can find you.
You can find me at Tech Savvy Diva everywhere.
And you can find me all over the internet at Brother Tech. That's BROTHATECH. I think that's going to do it for this week. Like I said, I am traveling again next week, so you have to wait and see what Nica has in store for you next week. But until then, we are out. Peace.
Bye, everybody.